I've got it decently in my soul that the ultimate joy in life is surrender to the Lord Jesus. And I'm selfish enough about myself to grasp some of that joy and understand it and seek it. And out of that wholeness, then he leads you to where your passion is, where you can do 100x.
So Terry, in this next segment, we want to turn our attention to some of the life hacks, if you will, or some of the things that are powerful lessons you've learned about your broader life and going from building a great business to building a great life. And very often, I think those of us who are, successful business leaders and owners are afraid that if we learn these softer skills, if we get to neutral, if we become surrendered fully, that somehow we'll dumb down our contribution in the business world. Our investments will be soft. We'll be, and it's hard to argue with $3 billion in revenue. So
I run into that a lot. I think our heads think that probably 70, 80, 90% of the business people actually think what way you said that. And it's just false as heck. I couldn't state something falser or more incorrect. So I don't think there's a word called falser, but if there is, use that one too. So anyway, back to you, Mike.
Can you tell us one of the most beneficial things you've done with your children over the years to impact them and just practical advice around raising children?
Oh, one little adage is remember who the kid is. We think a lot of times as a parent, we can say and do things to them that's really very dishonoring. I mean, the little kid in us, you can't trust yourself. You need to remember who the kid is. The kids are supposed to disappoint you. I mean, that's part of life, but it's how you react. And then when you react as a kid, it's just wrong. So you have to start guarding your heart and being strategic. They clearly watch what you do and not what you say. Period. End of story. So anything you can do to grow and become whole. I cried a lot once I finally burned out and changed because, I had not been a good father and had not been a good husband in a lot of ways. And so I dug a big hole. And so I spent an ardent, one was in middle school or almost middle school, and one was almost getting ready to go to high school. I spent the next 6+ years before they both went off to school of intense hanging out. Yeah, I was blessed. I was very, very blessed. I remember one time they were complaining about Sunday school, and I said, okay, I tell you what, it's an hour. We'll do 30 minutes here at the house. I'll teach. You pick the subject half the time, and you pick the subject. They said, never mind, Dad, we'll go to Sunday school. So, I mean, they don't want a lot of you, but they watch what you do. They watch what you do and who you are.
That's amazing. I heard you mention earlier, you already have given a lot of practical marriage advice, but do you have anything that you've done, date nights or trips with your wife, like any practical advice around marriage that has had the biggest impact?
You need to decide whether you want to be right or you want a relationship. And man, that has been a hard habit to break. At the office, you want to be right. You tend to want to be right. Actually, you like to be right. And even when you're right with your wife, do you want to be right or do you want a relationship? I had that same problem with my brother, and my mentor said, well, do you want to be right or do you want a relationship with your brother over him messing up where we hunted? And I said, well, I want both. He said, well, you don't get both. I said, oh, crap. Anyway, so I had to swallow hard and go at a different angle. If she hurts my feelings or whatever, I mean, you can't talk to anybody about the speck in their eye when you have a boulder. It goes over like a lead balloon because you're judging in your conversation. So when Darcy hurt my feeling or something, which doesn't happen very often, I'll not speak about it until I'm not upset about it. And I'll take a day or two, and then I'll just say, by the way, you hurt my feelings the other night. And then I'm not judging her, and I'm not condemning her. And then she'll apologize, and we'll go about our business. I believe, the Bible says, don't go to bed with anger on your heart. I believe it's worked for me is don't go to bed with the anger in your heart without making a commitment you'll deal with it. So for you to try to deal with it with both of you angry, man, that's a painful process. So if you wait till you get neutral and forgive and whatever, and then discuss it in a holistic, rational way, it's night and day. It's night and day. And we go away. I believe you got to go away with your wife, your spouse, without kids and without friends 2-3 times a year. Mine's 3 times a year with no one with us. I mean, you got to remember. You forget why you even got married with those. I tell young men when they're in their 30s and 40s still have kids at home. I said, I think that's the worst season in marriage. It's just crazy what we do to keep up with the kids.
Yeah. Terry, last time you and I had we were together with some other couples for a marriage retreat weekend. You guys have worked on a great marriage for a long, long time, and yet you discovered, I think, some new area of growth. And I remember you kind of leaning into that. And I find that when Linda raises something where I need to grow or do better or really change my heart and character, or allow God to, that first reaction is I'm disappointed in myself. But I didn't sense that you were particularly disappointed in yourself, that you just sort of found a new area of growth. So how do you deal with that?
Well, that example is probably one of my best. I did something to embarrass her in front of the group, and we were the oldest. We were supposed to be the ones that, were kind of going to be part teachers, whatever. Well, I ended up embarrassing her, and we ended up having an argument. And on the way home, she said, "You, in this area of my life, you've never respected me. Your mother didn't respect me. We've been married probably 40 years or whatever." And I had to admit to her and to the Lord that I didn't. And so, but I told the Lord when I got home, I said, I don't know how to, it's kind of like feeling his love, I don't know how to do that. And I said, but I was in tears. I said, I'm going to do my part. And I demand, so to speak, you do your part. So I studied the Bible about marriage and about wives and respect and this and that. And I started getting on my knees every morning, which I don't normally do. And I said, I'm going to get on my knees every morning till you change me. And 5 months, and I didn't have to get on my knees anymore. And didn't have to mention it to her because the soul knows, the subconscious knows. I never had to say a word to her. I knew, and she was going to know by the end of the day or the end of the week, because the Lord and I knew. So that's how intentional, made me tear up. That's how intentional I was to honor my wife.
That is cool. Very powerful. That was amazing. Can you tell everyone, I mean, other than the Bible, is there a book that's had a huge influence on your life? And of course, other than your own book.
There has. But let me just say, and y'all know this actually better than I do. We don't approach the Bible usually the way we're supposed to. Teaching doesn't get you there. It doesn't get you from your head to your heart. Learning, journaling, dissecting, we got to get whatever is going to change. Nothing changes us unless it gets to the heart. So teaching in general does not get to the heart. So memorizing scripture, I mean, the Bible's incredible, but you have to get it, well, however you do it, from the head to heart. Discipleship does. It's a life learning experience, and start using Bible verses to where they actually drip from your head to your heart, and it's slow too. Is like I had two verses on my wall in my study, and one of them was Psalm 42:1, called "As the deer pants for the water brook, so my soul pants for thee." For 10 years, I told the Lord that wasn't in my soul. I said, I don't pant for thee. I've got a great relationship. I felt your love, but I don't pant for thee as my heart felt. And I went through 2 years of really tough times here at Texon due to my sin. And when those 2 years were up, I looked up on the wall and I went, I'll be darned. That's in my soul. So you got to start learning what's in your head and what's in your soul, because there's a huge difference in terms of how it impacts you.
Can you talk a little bit about your journey? You mentioned earlier that you had struggled early on with just really wanting to make money and were very concerned about money. Can you talk about your journey from being really concerned about money to being an extremely generous person, and that the evolution of that process?
Well, it's just that he just transformed me, I guess is what I'd say. I will say, once I got to where I had the joy of giving, I became a much better businessman. And what I say by that is I no longer swung for the fence falsely when the percentages were silly, and I no longer hoarded money and where I was worried about losing the money, and consequently I started making a lot better decisions once I got joy in my heart of giving, and not duty, and not just meeting, giving to the budget of the church or whatever. It really blessed me. So I so I tell people, it's not the percentage as much as the joy. Get to where it's actually joyful. Again, you got to pray through that and work at it, but you will be blessed. You will become a better businessman, in my opinion. I think I'm worth way more because of my wholeness versus chasing the rainbow. Right. I'm absolutely convinced the little boy in me would have screwed up 77 times more than I've screwed up as a semi-surrendered follower of Christ.
Right. And Micah, I want to hear from you for a second, because I've watched you become extravagantly generous in your late 30s as a successful real estate developer. And even now, when people who own malls like you do and retail spaces, you read in the Wall Street Journal, they're all freaked out. And yet you've got an entire business that gives all the profits to ministries. And so what do you feel that what Terry have you been learning that what Terry just said?
Absolutely. What I have learned though, and I've always encouraged other of is you've got to figure out what you're passionate about giving to. And that's different for everybody. So, early in my life, I was just writing checks to, great stories or a video I'd watch that make me cry. And as I've gotten older, and honestly, Lloyd, with a lot of your help, the more I've found things that I'm passionate about that, in our community, like the more excited I've gotten about giving. And frankly, it's transformed the way, as Terry just spoke about, it's transformed how I think about my business. I'm more excited to grow my business and grow the revenues because I know the purpose of the money that we're making. So it's been a lot of fun. And Lloyd, I thank you for all that you've walked with me in that journey.
And so one thing I tell a guy that's kind of starting to think about giving, I couldn't agree with you more, Micah, is I say, start giving where you've been fed. Is your kid been fed in Young Life or camp? Or where's your wife been fed? Where have you been fed? Because that's where you're going to find passion, at least to start with. Give where you've been blessed, and that'll grow your passion.
Absolutely. Terry, if you had to go back a couple years, and maybe it's 5 or 10, but if you had to give your 40-year-old self advice, what advice would you give now with the perspective of years?
Find every way possible to surrender to the Lord, and find every way possible to grow when you gut pain.
That's great advice. What advice do you have for raising? Obviously, your children grew up in a home with excess means. What advice do you have on passing along generosity to your kids, and how to teach them to be generous when they? It sounds like they grew up much different than you did as a young
Sure.
man.
Sure. My two daughters and I and Doris meet once a month and visit about it and what we're doing with our money and kind of how's life going. We we have kind of a different approach a little bit because I'm kind of hands off kind of personality. We give them a certain percentage of our total giving. Now they're 40. We probably started this when they were maybe 40 and 44, where we give them. Actually, we probably started a little younger than that. Now to think about it, but we started small, like 25 grand a year, each one of them could give, and then kept increasing it to now that. So I don't really get involved in their. I don't edict or give them approval on the amount they give. We just in January we transfer the whole amount into a National Christian Foundation in their names, and then they give it that year or don't. I mean, usually they always give it, but they can delay, whatever. And we all learn from our mistakes and talk about, and we talk, so that's one way we've done and really enjoyed it.
Terry, Lloyd and I talk a lot about how sadly, very few men finish their life well, stay on the journey with God and stay focused on their marriage and raising kids and mentoring grandkids. What have you done along the way to, be sitting here today, continuing to pursue God and living this amazing life?
I've got it decently in my soul that the ultimate joy in life is surrender to the Lord and Jesus. And I'm selfish enough about myself to grasp some of that joy and understand it and seek it. And out of that wholeness, then he leads you to where your passion is, where you can do 100x. My big prayer for us today was that I would glorify him and not me. I mean, for them to say, "Isn't Terry something?" is what a waste on my part. If they didn't get a glimpse of the gift of the Lord as you want more of him and less of you, then it's been a whole failure of us having this today.
I agree.
Terry, you and I have a common friend that is suffering from serious cancer right now. How have you learned to comfort a dear friend in that time with the long-term perspective you have on life?
Well, fortunately, I think we're talking about the same person. He is one of the more unique people that has been wanting to go see Jesus since I first met him. I'm going, how do you get that in your soul? That is still not in my soul. And I've now have in my soul, and only at about age 70, that I'm excited about going to heaven. But I'm still, to have in my soul about the gift of seeing and hanging out with Jesus is still honestly not in my soul. So I've been learning more from him, probably, Lloyd, than he's been learning from me. I find somebody that's got a perceived short life left. I need to humbly listen a whole lot more than give suggestions, because I think I knew one guy that was dying of cancer and close, but if you walked in his hospital room and you said anything that had to do with just the world or flesh, he started singing. And the more you'd try to talk something about flesh or weather, he would sing so loud that the entire floor would hear him. He would just drown you out and say, if it's not about something important, I'm going to sing. So I've been trying to keep our friend from singing to me so I could learn something from him. So I don't know that I really, it's just a journey for all of us.
Terry, as we wrap up, do you have any kind of final advice for people that do want to live 100x life? Do you have any parting wisdom for them?
I got impacted recently rereading 1 Corinthians 13 on the love chapter, but not the part about what is love, but the there's about 5 verses, but about verse 3, 4, and 5 is if you can be the wisest man in the world, you can accomplish the most in the world, you can have the biggest faith in the world, but if you don't have love, you have nothing, just blooming nothing. And some reason I've been reading those verses lately, like there's nothing left in those verses to give you any wiggle room. That if it's not about love, and of course, God's very binary. I mean, he's all about love. If you had to pick one word, that's it. So I would say you got to tap into that. And you got to get to where that's your priority, both to receive his love internally and to give his love externally, and let him work through you, and it be about him and his ministry, not you and yours.
Terry, I just want to thank you for the life that you're living and the example that you're setting for guys like me and Lloyd and the people that will listen to this. Just thanks for your faithfulness and the example you're setting. We know you do give the credit to God, and we just thank you for your time today and all of your wisdom. Thank you for listening to the 100X podcast. Please subscribe to the show on your favorite podcast service. We would greatly appreciate it if you could rate the show and leave us a review. This podcast is sponsored by Anchor Investments, whose mission is to build America's most generous real estate company. To learn more, please visit anchorinv.com.